to you about sort of that first job. I know some of you are looking for your first job. I think this is applicable to any level of product management. I mean, if I was starting today, I would still go with that same checklist that I'm going to share with you today, even if it was like in the middle or senior level of product management. So the main milestones here are to, number one, understand sort of not only the processes and the culture itself, but also how you fit into that. And so you do need to ask some strategic questions and do some strategic research to find out how you fit into this. Because as I said, for you who got here early, product management means 100 things, depending on where you are at the organization. And so especially your first month, the objective is going to be to figure out how can you add value and how do you fit into the organization. And then it's all about delivering quick wins, but they have to be strategic. So the first win, it shouldn't be, you know, I'm coming in and redesigning your process because I think this doesn't work. It may be true, but it ruins your relationships. And so there are some examples of projects that I'll share with you that I usually do at the very beginning. And then always run retros. That's always a great little tidbit. People are very comfortable sharing what went wrong with a person that was not there when they did the work. And so as a newbie, it's sort of an easy thing that you can do. Just make sure that it's going to be part of your job responsibilities anyway. And so you might as well take advantage of that and take the lead right away. And sort of the last part, we're not going to cover the whole 6 months. It's going to continue happening. So bear with me. So the last 6 months, the whole presentation is not going to focus on the whole six months. I would keep you guys here for 3 hours. So I'm going to limit to sort of the first 30 days and go in depth there. I find that that's going to give you the biggest bang for the buck. And then we're going to move into some of the first projects that you can do. And then from there, it's all about sort of roadmap, and we can talk about what comes after. I'm happy to do that. All right, so the first 30 days is going to be all about sort of these 5 things on the left. Figuring out the company and sort of what the people and the processes are, and really taking your sweet time with that. And then getting really into the product itself. And there, I mean, trying to get as much time with your user as possible, and then also trying to understand your competitors as much as possible. And so you're going to be spending time on these 5 things. And I can share a much more detailed checklist with you guys at the very end, where I sort of go week by week what I have my employees do and what I would do in any job, quite frankly, starting out. All right, so the first thing that I want to focus on is the people. There are some specific things that I found here are really helpful. So product management, in my view, at least in the positions that I've had, is first and foremost about managing people and being able to establish good relationships with people. I at least attribute the success of my role to that. Probably in 70% of that is actually managing, being able to establish good rapport with people. I have a small organization. I just mentioned for you guys, we started last year and sort of like launched an MVP version of the product. We've come a long way and are now on our way to scaling. But right now we are still a tiny startup-like team. There's 20 of us. But I sit literally in the middle of everyone. I interface with every single team, and it's very hands-on and exhausting sometimes. But again, I am sure that let me just move this. I am sure that the team understands what the priorities are, where we're going with the product, and there's never, I shouldn't say there's never, but the number of times when we feel conflict or miscommunication happened is very rare because there is this over communication at every step. So it's very important. So in the first sort of week, I would say, obviously the first thing you have to do is meet with your manager, but the first meeting should be really about setting expectations. And I say that to you from an experience that I had where I didn't do that, and it really backfired. So like really setting goals for 30, 60, 90 days, and sort of going beyond that, like understanding how often does your boss want to communicate with you? What's their preferred style of, giving work? How do they give feedback? And requesting that for feedback, any evaluation that you have, there is another person that is involved so that laterally they can see your progress as well. Especially in startups where you'll likely have one boss and that's it. And that's the person that judges your success. It's kind of a crazy environment, right? Because there's like no other inputs that matter. And so it's important that you set that from the beginning and say, is there another person that's going to be involved in my feedback? I think it's really important for me that I see sort of another. Your boss can't be with you in every meeting, and so having another perspective is really important. Also, doing one-on-ones. So after your boss, there's other meetings that you have to have with every single member of the team. Honestly, overdo it. In the first days of your work, you're going to have a lot more time than you ever will. And so I think it's important that you actually overdo it at the very, very beginning and meet with everybody. And what you want to ask is 2 questions I find especially helpful. The first one is, how can I help you make your life easier, right? So what can I do to help you do your job? I find that this sets the scene as you're not there to command as a product manager, which product managers have a lot of influence. But that influence is gained, right? Like that is not something that you're given the authority. You have to sort of gain that from your interactions with your team members. So making sure that you're there at their disposal and making sure that they know that right from the beginning is super important. Other questions that are helpful is, and one more thing, when you're asking that, it's very insightful to listen to the answers, because when a person is saying, you can help me with X, Y, Z, they also are telling you what they think product managers should do, which is very insightful. Again, product management works differently in different organizations. So it gives you another piece of information. Other things, the second question that I always ask, even in my coffees when I'm meeting with somebody, it's like, what is harder than it should be at this point in your organization? What do you feel is much harder than it should be? And it's an indication. The answer will always give you an indication of what is the cause of tension. What tensions are there in the organization that you should be aware of? What are you struggling with? And for your boss particularly, every person has sort of a pet project, an interesting thing that they wish they had time they could do. Maybe it's not at the top of the priority list, but it's something that's important to them. If you ask your boss at the very beginning, is there any project that, you wish you could do, but you just don't have enough hours in the day, I bet they'll have an answer. And that's like a very easy win that you can pick up, and your relationship with your boss will just start off on the right foot. So make sure that you ask that. Again, this is the only time that you'll probably have time as a product manager, so use it wisely. When people share their problems and you think you can help them with those problems, try to, and especially if you promise something, make sure that you take note of that and then send them a follow-up message, not only with, hey, I think I can help you with that. Like we talked about this, sort of a summary, but also schedule a meeting for 3 months in advance to say, let's follow up on this in 3 months and see where we are. because you're telling them that you're not only listening to them and sort of promising, but you're also taking the steps, the real steps to try to do what's best in your ability. So I find that was helpful. And in general, make yourself useful. So in my organization, again, it's a startup. We don't have any protocols. We have very little documentation. And so where possible, where I saw, somebody was telling me the history of whatever, our parent organization, and somehow that affected us, I created documentation where it was lacking. Again, it's sort of an area that is mundane and people don't want to do it, but it's necessary. And the more you can show in real things that you are there at the team's disposal and you're not afraid of the dirty work sometimes, the faster you're going to gain their trust. And that is huge. I find that that's like the main objective of the 30 days is try to get on the right footing with your team members. All right, and now I think we're going into the process. So process. This is the objective for that is figuring out, again, how you fit into the organization. So you got to know what is the process. How does the organization set their KPIs, their strategy? Who makes decisions? Like, is it top, bottom, up, whatever it is? You got to sort of understand and be smart about those things because they will affect you as a product manager. And so who are the decision makers? Who's sitting at the top of the table, right? Setting up the vision, the strategies, the KPIs, the goals. And how does product management fit into that? That's important. In my organization, especially in startups, this is different for enterprise-wide organizations, which is where I worked before. And you really don't have the power or the influence to influence those top-line metrics. In my organization, it is actually very collaborative. But end of the day, kind of, the boss will say, is the strongest person in the room. And so I had to understand that right from the beginning. And in our case, that means our stakeholder who's kind. So very kind. That was a pun. I'm terrible at puns. So, okay. Understand a company's approach to product management. So how is the sausage made? This is super important, right? We have a design-driven process where every bigger feature is actually validated by users from many countries because that education works differently everywhere. And so it's really hard, but we try to do that and we move a little bit slower, but it's well worth it in the end. So you got to make who makes what decisions. When I talk to my friends at bigger product management organizations, it's kind of like, I'm responsible for this tiny widget somewhere on the third page in. In my organization, product management has tremendous control of, number one, just influence over the organization and the goals of the organization. Not the goals of the organization, but the roadmap and how we get there. So it's important that you understand that, usually sitting with somebody, either if it's your boss or somebody else, trying to really understand how does product management fit into that. I also control the resources, right? The resource allocation. And so every week, I'm the person who says, our engineering design product team is going to work on X, Y, Z, and that's driven by the roadmap. But this works differently in every organization. One of the important things is understanding what is being measured, right? So I mentioned KPIs or OKRs, whatever it is at your organization. What builds up to that? Is your company tracking that? If they are not, make sure that you note that to yourself. That is obviously something that you could have control over as a product manager, is setting the metrics that we're going to be tracking. And that's pretty much it for that. Product, your favorite part. So a couple of things here. The main thing is just learning every single corner of your product. You're going to continuously learn. I'm the biggest tester of my tool. I'm in it all the time obsessively. And so that's never going to end. But in the first, I would say 30 days, you got to sit down with your engineers several times. The one piece of advice that I have there is even for the technical product managers, don't try to pretend you know. If you don't have, I find that engineers respect product managers who say, I don't understand. Can you explain? That was my secret key to like gaining respect from the engineers and having them explain. They were so passionate about what they've built, right? It's actually them building it, not you. And so they're more than happy to sort of explain and explain and explain again the architecture or whatever questions that you may have at this point. Again, testing and playing the role of QA. If you have QA in larger organizations, make sure that you get some quality time with people, sit down with them, go through their routine, be with them. If you don't, try to test, try to pretend, right? And just run through the different edge cases. Maybe if you don't know the edge cases, try to find out from your team members what they are. And one other thing is understanding the past. I still get annoyed for that, right? So there are people that come into organizations that will right away, boots on the ground, and I appreciate the initiative, but will come in and say, like, this is terrible. And I'm sure you all had that experience, right? And we have to change it right away. Just know that if you're that person, the rest of the organization is going to speak to you and about that one moment for years to come. I've actually made that mistake in a very sort of like minimal version where I suggested our all staff meetings were kind of messy, put it lightly, where they were lengthy. And, I was kind of like, what is the goal of this meeting? What's going on? And so right away, like within a couple of weeks, I suggested we should have reports by team where, everybody reports 2 things that their team completed that affects other team members, and the 2 things they were working on in the next couple of weeks. And I was kind of like a drill sergeant, right? I had like 2 minutes only, like it's got to be like on point. Yeah, that didn't go well. I mean, I got the support of the top level, and everybody was kind of in principle excited, but then I didn't understand that like they've gone through a routine already. They've had meetings for a long time. There were things to learn there from what didn't work out, and I didn't ask the questions. I was just like, this doesn't work, clearly. Yeah, be wary of that. My husband always brings up the one person that he worked with, and I'm like, dude, it's been 3 years since she's working with you. Like, let it go, So try not to do that. I usually like to, the first project that you implement, use the existing process. And then, it gets you the buy-in to say, I think we could improve this. What do you guys think? And little by little, I promise you, you will change things. Users, obviously, all of you know that this is super important for the empathy for the user is super important for the success of your product. This is why I spend time with teachers and students. I don't have kids. And so making sure that I get to classrooms and actually can understand how do kids communicate, how do they express friendship, what can we expect from the tools, some of the indicators. It's like all super important. I cannot emphasize that. And in fact, if you go on Empatico, you're going to see me sometimes pop up on the chat box because in addition to getting myself into the classrooms, I also sit down and answer tickets on the help center. It keeps me close to understanding the user's problems. Again, I'm not a teacher. I've never been. And so that's the closest way of me to, and our tool is global, right? So even if I was a teacher, that would be different if I was in Brazil and I don't understand that context. And so it keeps me really close to the user. So when I say understand the user problems, that means in real terms, sit on the help desk and answer tickets in your first, and you should probably volunteer to do it for the rest of your career as a product manager, honestly. Or if not answer, at least monitor. It gives you real authority then in your priority setting, by the way. If you can say users need this for X, Y, and Z, and I've seen it with my own eyes, it's like tremendous. What that statement can give you in team meetings where maybe something is, you're getting pushback, and so like being real about that experience is important. The real customers part, like talk to your customers, existing customers, that's also important, not in the settings of I have a problem, but just in general, understanding the value proposition, talking to your regular customers and saying, yeah, why are you using us? What do we have that you couldn't live without? What's the next thing you want to see in our tool? How are you getting around that thing that you don't have in our tool today? All those questions are relevant. And by the way, all the questions that I shared to you and much more I'll share with you afterwards. It's really difficult to keep them all in my head at once. So afterwards, I'll give you access to all that stuff. Getting on the forums, meaning creep on your users a little bit. They behave differently when you talk to them. And so you'll see me, I hate Twitter, but I'm on Twitter for work reasons and seeing teachers and what they talk about. The same with forums, you know, tracking what questions they ask, again, when Empatico is not in at least visible. Yeah, it's not visible. They don't know I'm there, but I'm there. And then also participate in sales calls. Again, hearing salespeople talk about the value proposition and selling the product is very insightful. It'll tell you a lot more about how you differentiate yourself from your competitors, which brings me to the next point, understanding competitors and understanding the market. So it goes beyond just the competitors. Make sure that in the first 30 days, you set up your Google alerts for not only your competitors' news, because you want to make sure how they innovate and sign up for their newsletter and do all that, sign up for their services, be their super user, but also understanding the space. So for me, in my case, that means I need to know what EdTech is doing as a whole and what EdTech is doing like in terms of global trends, right? So education, again, looks very different in rural India than it does today here in New York City. And so I need to know what the forces are over there because I want to be in that part of the world, for example, picked one. And so, you know, digital classrooms in my case, I kind of stay on top of it and try to understand, you know, how do I bring value? What are the ministries around the world doing around this? And how can Empatico insert itself into the top level sort of ministry level education of Ministry of Education level play. And then for the first 30 days, specifically creating a competitive matrix. If your organization doesn't have it, just listing your competitors and then all the features that you have in your product and more that your competitors have but you don't have, and just very simply expressing that on the page, putting an X when you have something versus when your competitor has something, that will help you understand what the differentiations are. And again, sitting with sales generally helps that. So if you are in a one-on-one meeting, they'll tell you all about it. And don't forget about yourself. I'm a big proponent of that. It's really easy to get and just give it all to the organization. You're so excited, but this is a time, again, to establish like what will happen when shit hits the fan, actually, and that will happen. And so who is in your support network? Who can you contact? Again, establishing with your supervisor, saying that I would like some lateral reviews of my work, as well as sort of up and down. You want to create a system that protects you as much as possible, because that sometimes it's outside of your control, right? You're doing as much as you can. And when there's one person reviewing your work, for example, it's hard, right? And then sharing your problems with other product managers, joining the groups. I have a list of Slack channels that I'm part of that I can also share. Is super helpful as well. setting up your systems, and sort of think about strategically what you want to continue learning in your job, and then also, what you want to improve on, how you're going to get there. Almost there. This is just a thing. I wrote a post that I'll share with you, and it's just outlines basically all the questions to ask and each week, what to focus on. Use it as a guide. It's not perfect. I don't know your organization, but it's a good guide. So I'll send that to you. Don't worry about that. All right, so we're past 30 days, and that is most of my presentation. So I'm going to get to your questions very soon. I just want to touch on what happens next, because this is the time when maybe the 30 days is actually condensed in your case because you have a small product or you don't have the luxury of time of spending 30 days on studying your company and your products. But ideally, it would be first 30 days. But the first projects that you can jump on are, this is probably before the 30-day mark ends, and that's testing yourself, setting up a demo with your internal colleague where you are actually demoing your product. And just phrase it as this is an opportunity for me to test myself, what I know, and also identify gaps where maybe I don't fully understand something. It is also a hidden technique to gain confidence and trust of your coworkers. Again, I go back to that all the time because so from my line of research, with Empatico, if kids share something vulnerable, something personal about them, that's one indicator of getting closer to another person, right? So we really like when kids say something about their family or something about their dog, something that is personal to them. This is the same thing, like presenting in front of somebody, even though it's your product, we're in tech. We're not this is not natural to me. I don't like to talk to a number of people, right? So presenting your product maybe in an all-staff meeting can be nerve-wracking, but it will get you closer to your people because now they understand that, you understand the product and you're also a little shy about it or whatever it is. Even if you mess up, that will get you closer to your people because people empathize, research says. So also presenting observations to the team. You just spent 30 days studying the team. It may feel like in some ways you really want to get out there and actually start implementing, start doing your own projects, shipping features. This is a work product, by the way. If you can aggregate all your thoughts about what's happening in the organization, where you think that the gaps are when we're talking about data, what are we collecting, what are we not collecting, and give it to your boss as this is a synthesis of what I think I saw in my first few days. They're going to be so grateful because it's an outside sort of pair of eyes that is coming in with a brand new perspective. And then implementing quick wins for folks. As you're testing your product, you're going to come across some bugs. So if you can actually solve those and fix them, that's great. Not everybody is technical enough. I certainly would not do that. But what you can do if you're not technical, I would recommend a content project at the very beginning. So in my organization, because we were so small, there is nobody that was overseeing help desk, right? So for the longest time, it was kind of yeah, we have these FAQs and that help center portion that we put together over a weekend when we were launching a crazy thing at the very beginning. But so when I came in, I stepped in and said, all right, I'm going to revamp this thing. We need to translate it to other languages. I've seen questions on help desk that are emerging as themes. Let me add those in as new articles, and again, translate those, add visuals, things like that. A content project is usually people hate doing stuff like that unless it's your job and you love it, but as a product manager, you don't love that thing. But again, it's kind of showing your team members that you're willing to jump in and do the thing. Retros, I already mentioned that. Requesting feedback, again, from your team early and often, not just from your boss. And then start planning for the future. And this is kind of a longer thing, but analyzing data and trying to figure out what the next user problems are to solve, and then using that as one of the inputs to your roadmap. Your next life after that, right, after the first 30, maybe 60 days is going to be very much so focused, at least it should be, right, about 50% of your job on trying to figure out where are we going as a strategy, as a roadmap, and then like the other half is probably implementing that roadmap and making sure that you ship things. So with that said, I talked way too much, and so I'm done. Speaking about feedback, take a picture of this or type it in your phone right now. I will send you everything, I promise, and it's in fact already set up on Zapier. So if you give me bad feedback, I'll still give you the stuff. I want to know your honest opinion. There's only a couple of questions. You can do it right now. You can do it later on. I really appreciate it. And thanks, you guys. You've been a very kind audience. I appreciate it.